Hey there guys, Alex here, welcome to another vlog. This week we're going to talk about what it means to be a great developer, in my opinion. Just decided this every now and then in my streams I write down some of the questions that people most commonly ask, and then this is kind of how I'm going to be basing some of the weekly videos for now, and then maybe we're going to mix it up with some other things that I actually want to do without involving anyone else asking. In today's video, it's going to be a monologue, and I'm not going to cut or edit anything, so it's going to be a lot of my thoughts. They might be or might not always I might repeat myself a few times. I might, it's not a super easy to record a video in a single go and not say anything wrong, right? But I do want it to be natural because humans are by nature not perfect, right? So we're imperfect, right? So in today's video, we're going to just touch upon in general level of what I think it means. A great professional truly is, almost regardless of if you're a software engineer or not, and then we can kind of break down into a bit more specific things into software engineers only, right? I think fundamentally what I think that a good professional is a person who tries to bring value to the business and value to the customers. I think this applies to no matter what you do. You can be in sales or marketing or selling boats or selling hamburgers or writing code. Your fundamental obsession should be the customer, because the creation, the output of your work is something that somebody uses. If that person or organization or group of people aren't happy with your product, then on a fundamental level what you're doing is wrong. Now it's like some painter would paint the picture and uses the best brushes, the best paint, the best whatever, the best location. If nobody likes the picture, well, then fundamentally who cares, right? So this is kind of how I like in general to think about what a professional, who a professional is, and this is kind of something that I feel that people should focus on when they try to reinvent themselves, when they try to find new passion. Because, for example, a software engineer, more and more as you go into seniority level, you're going to be feeling maybe less impactful or inspired by technology itself, because by that point you're going to kind of already do everything already. You're going to learn all the patterns and you're going to redo the same stuff just through a different framework or different library. But fundamentally you will have to then reinvent yourself. You will have to kind of find something new to get inspired by, right? And what happened to me in my career, basically, that's literally what happened. I kind of got inspired by seeing that something that I'm doing is meaningful. It provides some value. It has some more value than just some code that now at this moment, me thinking that it's perfect, that it's actually somebody in 5 years is going to come and say, well, that thing actually just is sucks. Like, who wrote this code? And this kind of happens whenever you see some legacy code. Most developers are like, oh my god, who wrote this gibberish, right? So don't think that that's not going to happen with your code. So fundamentally, again, you have to care about your customers and you have to care about the business, because the business pays the salaries. Business makes everything happen. And when I say business, I don't mean that on a complete capitalistic level, like treating the business as a third-party entity. Business is you guys, the group of people who decided to work together, and in order for you guys to still continue working together, you need to pay the salaries. You need to do all of the things that business has to do to survive, right? So fundamentally, I think those are the kind of very general things you should care about. Now, and how do you become that person that genuinely cares about the business value and cares about, or the developer that cares about business value, cares about the customer, but still performs your tasks within a good quality? So this video by no means suggests that your code quality or your perception towards technology should change, or that you should lower it based on the business. Absolutely not. Those two things are not mutually exclusive. They can both coexist. But how do you get yourself to the point of being that developer that's both caring and stuff, but also super much productive, right? And I think this is kind of also in the article that I'm going to write about this video. You can find it on Programmer Network. I'm going to share the link somewhere in this video. I'm going to have a list of things that I just randomly wrote. They're not in any particular order. I just wrote them based on how I felt. But essentially, I think everything starts when we're building things. So if we get now to the more product-oriented discussion, like building things, right? I think fundamentally is like, how do you start a task, right? A lot of junior developers especially, and also those are the ones that ask this question the most, they usually ask, how as a junior can I become better? What should I focus on? Should I be this type of developer or that? But generally, right? You should be actually focusing not on the technology ever. You should be focusing always on the approach. So, for example, if we are looking at the construction engineering, if we're looking about mechanical engineering, all those guys start the coding, or in their case, the building part, after they have, written millions of documents, research, math, and physics. Like, if think about the metro. When you're building a metro, right? You don't just start digging the holes and then building things. What you do is, like, you plan, you bring in the experts, you bring in all the possible parties. We can metaphorically assume, let's imagine that we're building a metro. Well, we need the government, and we need the construction companies, and we need the environmentalists. We need all sorts of different group of people to come with their knowledge, to combine it, and then eventually start building it. So if you're a software engineer, those are the questions you have to ask. So first and foremost, when you start building something, you have to ask yourself, do I actually understand, at the very least on the general level, what am I building, right? Do I know, like, what this feature is supposed to look like when it's finished, right? Is this cross-team, right? So if I start building this now, will I need help from someone else, from some other team, right? And I'm gonna get to the last point, why those questions are very important. So, will I need help from other team, either multiple teams and stuff? Who is necessary now? So we are early in developing this feature. Which parties are necessary very early on, and which parties are necessary later on in the process to define some of the things that we might need here. So go back to the metro metaphor, do we need the government involved here? Do we need the construction company, etc., right? So in simple words, like, you have to define, also you have to know, is this feature that you're building in isolation, only your team does this, you're not going to depend on anyone else, or is it just you guys, right? The next things are of course, we're trying to think of any potential side effects, any state. So let's say if you're building a user interface, right? Think about, okay, how does this component looks like when it's empty? How does this component looks like when it has 1 million items? How does this component looks like when there's an error, etc., etc., etc. And then, of course, any other side effects that potentially can be there. Of course, it would be too idealistic to assume that you can plan every single feature and have everything down, like, upfront. That's never going to happen. So the point here is not perfection. The point here is that you try to gather as much information upfront, so you kind of know what you're going to be dealing with. And of course, along the way, you're going to figure out something else, and that's fine. You're going to create a card for that. Oh, guys, we forgot about this. But that's going to be minimal, considering that you've already kind of at least tried to think about as many other things as possible, right? So I think before I continue with those points, I think I forgot to say, like, one of my favorite quotes by Albert Einstein is, like, he said something along those lines. He said, if I had an hour to solve a problem, I would spend 55 minutes looking for the right questions to ask. So even he and I assume most scientists out there have the approach of research and preparation, and then the do's and doing, right? So essentially, if to kind of summarize a few of those things before we move on, is like, understand the problem, ask if this is something you can do in isolation, or you need help from other people. Try to gather side effects, try to see, try to think of anything that you can think about, of error handling, of anything like that you might have forgotten, right? And then as we continue through this list, obviously it's very important to know for yourself why you're doing something. At Dream Data, where I currently work, we use objectives and key results, which is a framework of work where you essentially, in simple words, give autonomy to the teams. You come with them with a specific problem. It's like, hey guys, company has this problem, and you guys figure out the way how to do it, etc., etc. The good thing, amongst many other things about this framework, is that developers always know the why they're doing something, so you are kind of never disincentivized or demoralized. It's like, why am I even doing this? So if you're not using the OKRs or any framework where you know this, and if your managers or product manager, project manager, or whoever else isn't really there to explain why, ask those questions. Why we're doing this, why we're not doing something else. Feel free to challenge this. It's because if you have read, Inspired by Marty Kagan, he says that if you're utilizing your developers only for programming, you're utilizing only 50% of their ability to contribute. So in simple words, if your organization doesn't know that you're actually not just there as a tool to write code, but also to contribute with ideas, to drive the development of the product, feel free to be proactive, right? I think proactiveness is one of the most fundamental characteristics of a human being if you want to become this 10x, million X developer. If you want to get yourself out there, if you want to make other people depend on you in a good way, you have to be proactive. You have to try to push for things, you have to question them, etc., 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 right? And then in this list that you can also read in my article, I kind of go through some of the steps that I kind of along the way learned. As I'm gonna also say in this article, just a disclaimer, I by no means think that I'm perfect in those things, that I'm always just kicking ass and doing every single one of those points. It's very easy for us developers to sometimes assume some things are easy and they're gonna take 5 minutes, and we have some idea in our heads and we just say, hey, I already have enough of information, I'm gonna start. And then you promise to your product manager, your CTO, your other colleagues that you're gonna finish something in 2 hours, 5 minutes, then 3 days later you're still doing it. And actually this list that we're gonna continue now with exactly is important, so at the end of that list you can properly evaluate how long something is gonna take. So one thing that I've learned is that you should never really, if somebody asks you in the moment, so something that you didn't anticipate is, hey, hey John, hey Alex, hey Patrick, how long is this gonna take? Just say, I don't know. So if you're unable to kind of think about all of those things up front, like this framework of thought that we have here, say, I don't know, sit for 5 minutes, 10 minutes by your desk, and then try to figure out based on those things, ask the questions, go to other teams, go to your product manager, ask them those questions. Is this like cross team? Are we gonna need help from others? Do we have all the information necessary? Do we need the copy? Do we need this and that, right? Now, of course, one of the most fundamental points for software engineers is drawing, right? Pen and paper at the worst case. So are you drawing your diagrams? Are you having low fidelity mockups? Do you have high fidelity mockups if you need them, like Sketch or Figma or Photoshop, Adobe Illustrator? Did you at the very least understand your infrastructure? So if you're talking about infrastructure, about backend, did you draw your infrastructure? Can you visualize the services? Can you sit with your team and figure out, what communicates to what? Which protocol is used where? Which authentication method is used where? I think many teams out there, they don't diagram their infrastructures. For example, for Programmer Network, this project that I have, fundamentally, when I started the project, I started the Draw.io project, and now every single time I add an additional database, like recently I've added Redis, soon I'm going to add Neo4j, everything is instantly inserted in there, so it's really low effort maintaining this. The biggest problem is that if you don't do it and you end up with massive type of things, then forcing people to do it becomes very difficult, because people forget how they did this. Oh, we had those firewall rules there. We have, right? So more you kind of procrastinate and wait and avoid to do this, later is going to be, in the later more you wait, more difficult it's going to be to kind of do it later, right? So basically, yeah, to kind of get back on track here, so fundamentally we started talking about how to become a better software engineer, and obviously as a single response, that would be obviously the process on how you start building something, right? I'm a bit random because this is recorded in a single go, but generally some of those points that I mentioned and some that you can read in my articles are fundamental, I think, to being a successful engineer. I'm gonna omit the software or any type of engineer. I think when you think about it deeply, being any type of engineer means focusing on the engineering part. We have, I think, allowed ourselves to be impacted way too much by the technology, by frameworks, languages, libraries, that we actually just drowned in that, and we forgot that engineering isn't just sitting and writing code. Engineering is actually what the word implies. Like, how do we engineer the solution? How do we think about it? How do we approach it? How do we most effectively approach it so we can be productive? And that's kind of what this point was about, is like, if you want to be productive, you cannot be walking backwards. If you want to win a marathon, you will not win it by running backwards, right? Or you're not going to win it by running a bit forwards, 10 step forwards, 20 step backwards. So if you want to avoid walking backwards, running backwards, doing something that your product manager tells you 2 days later, oh yeah, that's not what we wanted, or you and your colleague, you've been trying to do the same project together, and then you sit together 3 days later and you realize you've both been doing the same thing, or you've been doing completely opposite things that you didn't. So we all need to focus on those fundamental things. We need to go make many steps back. So all of us, no matter what you do, it can be the basic front-end development, back-end, infrastructure, all of it. You can be a physicist, a biologist, mathematician. You can't get away from having some framework of work. Your framework doesn't have to be like mine. It doesn't have to involve many of those things, but you have to have some sort of questionnaire as an engineer before you start doing something. So when somebody puts some requirements in front of you, you have to analyze them like a computer, and you have to stop at the places that you can't compile or interpret and say, hey, I don't understand this thing. I don't understand this thing. This thing is missing. Hey, are we gonna need help from those other 5 teams? No, okay, great. Is there a way to release this in a continuous deployment way? So this feature that we have like this, can we release it as a small version 1, then version 2, version 3, so we don't, end up working on a project for 3 months or 3 weeks or 2 weeks, and then add 2 people for a review that now they have to review like 15,000 lines of code or something like that, right? That never works. So we have to be the ones as engineers. Nobody's going to do this for us. Your product manager is not going to do this for you. Your CTO, your designer. We have to go back to the basics. We have to ask those questions. And I think this is the path to this 10x developer. This is the path where you become so, on a fundamental level, you become so organized and so thoughtful of things that you don't overpromise. You don't say it's 5 minutes and it's 3 days. You don't, and then you don't really start things without clarity. Of course, again, it's never going to be that all of the things are always clear, and that's impossible. Never worked in a company yet where you start a project and everything is absolutely clear. But as much of this as we can cut down and kind of narrow it down so 80% is clear, I think this is a super good way to build products. I don't know if I have really honestly anything else much to say. I think try to be proactive, super important. Try to be self-aware. I'm pretty much gonna say this in every video, and then try to question those things and try to force yourself to not start before you're truly ready. Not just when I say you, I'm basically talking into a camera, but it can be a group of people, it can be its whole team, it can be a whole organization, it can be an individual. No matter who you are, if you're watching this, try to make the few steps back, try to think about what programming is. And just like I often in my stream I use analogies like if you're when you pay a carpenter, or when you pay any sort of a handy guy, that person doesn't think about jigsaws and hammers and nails up front. What that person thinks about is like, okay, I need to make doors for this guy, and I need to make windows for this, and then the person eventually, when they measure and cut and stuff, then they use most of those tools to finalize the stuff. So I think us engineers, software engineers, we have to think in the same way. We can't be giving too much significance to those tools, because we get kind of we get obsessed by them. We focus too much of our energy that we forget that we're not there just to code. We're there to contribute in so many other ways. We're there to question the decisions, to provide solutions, to think about the user, to focus, to put ourselves in the shoes of the user and say, hey, if I'm building this software for myself, would I use it? Would I like this? And you don't have to be a designer. Don't get misled to think that only a designer or a UX designer is responsible for building something that's good. All of us are UX designers, and all of us are UI designers, and all of us are optimization engineers, and all of us are QA engineers. So all of this means, like, if you want to truly get the best out of yourself, if you truly want to shine and be the developer that people respect in your organization, then you have to be proactive, help your colleagues, try to make the organization where you work better, try to be thoughtful, try to apply this framework of thought. So when you are building something, you're not just a tool, you're not doing things in an inconsistent, inaccurate order, etc., etc., etc. I think that's probably what I have for today. I kind of got inspired in such a way today to talk about. Please read my article on Programmer Network. I'm going to include the link somewhere. And yeah, please, if you have any questions, and if you have any statements or comments, or actually if you have your personal framework of thought, if you have a book to suggest, if you have an article that you wrote yourself, please share it with the rest of us. I would honestly, there's nothing better than actually truly learning from other developers directly, because books are books and theory is theory, but there's many people out there who have figured nice ways to get around people, get around product managers, get around project managers and stuff like that. And I think it would be a great thing to share it with me as well, and share it with the rest of us, so we start this discussion, and maybe I record another video, etc., etc., etc. It's been good to see you guys. It's super windy here and cold. I think I'm gonna get on my bike and go and have some fun somewhere else. I'll see you guys next week. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you learned something, and have a lovely weekend. Have a lovely week, and I'll see you guys next week. Okay, cheers. Have a good one. Bye.